Hello and welcome back to the 1904 Club podcast from the Hull Daily Mail. We come to you after a thumping away victory that few probably saw coming at Bramall Lane on Friday night. So good it was, a 3-0 victory for City. Hopefully at some point we'll be joined by Fletch from his cupboard or his dark, dingy basement, but who knows what will happen on that. We have got Prutts. How are you, dear?
I'm good. Good to see you both. And obviously, what a wonderful result to be able to talk off the back of.
Absolutely, exactly. And Kathryn, that was magnificent on Friday night, wasn't it?
It was, Baz, and I wasn't expecting it to be magnificent because I had the Traitors final there watching, ready to come on, and it was the Traitors final that disappointed me. So it was not what I was expecting at all. But as Prutts said, a brilliant result and fantastic performance, and one of those results that City kind of just every now and again seem to pull out of the hat when you're not expecting it.
When we had the conversation last Monday about you watching the Traitors final and not being sure what to do, you could not have imagined that it would go that way, really.
I did say I was going to give them, so the Traitors final started at 8:30. I did say I was going to give them time to convince me to keep them on the big screen. And to be fair, they scored after 5 minutes, so maybe they were listening. You never know.
Prutts, that is the gaffer, Ruben Sayers. He said on Thursday that he wanted a statement performance, and the result would kind of take care of itself. He's very much one of those managers that I want my team to perform well. Hope we'll do everything we can to get the result, but it's football. You can't always guarantee it. But if there was ever a statement result in the Championship, probably this season, Hull City, with their form and the league position, to go to Sheffield United, who had lost 1 in 13 at home in the league, had conceded just 5 goals at home all season, for City to go there and win 3-0, and it probably should have been more.
Yeah, the collective ability of that defence for Sheffield United has been there for all to see, and by virtue of the fact that a win for them would have taken them back top, that literally speaks for itself in the sense of what they've done consistently since the start of the season. So you look at it, and it's an old-fashioned coupon buster, really, isn't it? Given the form of City, given the ability that we've seen, the lack of consistency we've seen from City. But going off what Ruben's saying, that's part management speak a little bit, because it's right now as well. Its results are absolutely paramount. It is obviously over the course of the season, but now the position that we find ourselves in with the end of the window coming up, Christmas done and dusted, the New Year game's all gone, then you are looking very it's still in the distance by quite a stretch, but that finish line will loom into view before we know it. So the results are absolutely paramount. But he is absolutely right in saying what he says, that by virtue of what of how a game pans out, the more often you play well, the more chance you've got of winning a football match, which is very much like common sense. But there were so many boxes to tick. I thought they showed a real resilience, because Sheffield United at home will come at you and come at you and come at you. Yes, they've got players missing, but they've got a better squad than Hull City. But saying that, the work that Ruben's done to get players in the door, great way for Matt Crooks to wave hello to the City fans and say, hopefully this is what you're going to get more often than not. Wonderful goal. Joe getting on the score sheet as well. And that bit look at the end, which the ball finds itself over the line. Plus, we'll come on to it, decision going for City. And I'm not saying that in a derogatory way of how they went and won the football match, because that's just how games go, ebbs and flows of decisions made by officials. But so much to like about it. And surprising. To throw it forward very, very briefly, the challenge then comes to be playing and beating teams that there is a bit more of a level footing, because a team that's in the top 2 against a team that was in the bottom 3, there is an inherent mismatch, and it should have gone the way on paper before a ball was kicked of Sheffield United. But as we know, football's not played on paper, and well done for City going there. And what I liked at the end as well, which I think people can get a bit cynical about, City going over to the fans and celebrating it. It's been a long, tough winter of footballing discontent, hasn't it, from City's point of view? So when you do go to a Yorkshire rival, and you come away with all 3 points and a clean sheet, you know what? Sod it. You might as well enjoy it.
That's the thing, though, Kathryn, isn't it? And you see a lot made of teams celebrating. I know we see it on Carragher and Neville talk about this a lot in the Premier League and how teams over celebrate. But it really annoys me when people get a bee in the bonnet. Football's about moments, it's about memories, and it's about enjoying that moment. And that was exactly what City. If you can't enjoy a 3-0 win at Sheffield United, who I think City had won there twice since 1971 before Friday night. They'd not won there at all since 2010. They've had a nightmare seat. Pretty much everything that can go wrong has gone wrong, this season. And I know Chris Wilder spoke about the plethora of injuries at Sheffield United. Well, let's take a look at the list of absentees at Hull City, by the way, if you want that conversation. But if you can't enjoy with 2,500 fans on a Friday night in Sheffield in the pouring rain, a moment like that, what is the point of it?
Well, I think you just took the words out of my mouth, Baz. Exactly. I mean, I've had some pretty miserable trips to Bramall Lane in recent years of just kind of getting beat. And I think that 2010 game, would that be the one where Jimmy Bullard scored potentially a penalty, which feels like an absolute lifetime ago. So it's been a long time since we'd won at Bramall Lane. And as you say, there's not been much to celebrate this season. So when you do get a big win like that, of course you want to enjoy it, because what's the alternative? Kind of just stand there and applaud and say, all right, okay, or just as long as you back it up in the next game. Football fans, we're not kind of managers, sort of like trying to keep everything calm. You want to enjoy the moment. So I'm sure we'll have some more miserable days to come at some point this season, and hopefully we have some more wins like that. You experience the lows, you should be able to experience the highs as well.
And we said that after last week's win at Millwall, wasn't it? It was similar scenario with the fans celebrating, with the players. A long trip for an early kickoff down in South London. It does my head when people, the celebration police, get on their high horse and say, you shouldn't be celebrating this, and you shouldn't be. Bugger off! Football is an emotional game. It's about enjoying it, and if you can't enjoy, and every team that's come to the MKM Stadium over the last 3 or 4 years and won pretty much every other week, they enjoy it. So damn sure we're going to do it. At Prutts, that's now 3 away wins on the spin, 3 clean sheets. 1-0 at Blackburn, who were in the playoffs at the time. 1-0 at Millwall, who weren't having the best of it, but got a new manager, a manager we know an awful lot about in Alex Neil. And then to go and keep a clean sheet at Bramall Lane, that is a big step forward from where we have been, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. And it does suggest that what we, in a positive way, looking to the start of the season as a collective, there is a squad in there, and there's a capability of that squad to be able to go and compete. Now, what Ruben's managed to glean out of it has been great on the road so far. Obviously, it'd be wonderful if that could then be turned into decent form at the MKM, but small steps. And it's 3 cracking results that when you get a team where it was and where it finds itself now, yes, I understand it's just a couple of points above the bottom 3, but that is a huge kind of psychological statement, I think, from City. And then it does the way that they want to play away from home, and the way that you can afford yourself to play away from home, is a bit of a mindset, is a bit of allowing the opposition potentially a bit more of the ball, and maybe operating in these games, as I said, with a little less expectation, as you said about Blackburn, where they are. Millwall, slightly different. There was that narrative, of course, with Alex Neil now being in the Millwall dugout instead of being in the City dugout. And then against Sheffield United, as we said, even though, I mean, every team is going to be missing players over the course of the season. Chris is right, I think, to point out that. I get if you're a bit cynical, you kind of go, it's kind of first world problems to have when you're talking about some huge players missing, but you've got pretty decent players to fill in. But any team in the Championship needs its best 11, and Friday exemplified that from Sheffield United's point of view. But it's about being able to consistently put those performances and get those results, as I said, more importantly, against those teams now that are in and around them. Because as much as your eyes are drawn as a neutral to the Championship and you look at the race for promotion, my God, there's a lot of teams that are in a very sticky situation down at the bottom. And then even then you look at results over the course of the weekend, who would have thought Plymouth would have got something? You don't, do you? You look at, we saw Luton that seemingly are in real trouble. So there's so much. Derby County, another one, I'm sure that's not lost on you, but given what their travails are. So, so there's it's. I think what you got to broadly say, Ruben coming in and doing the job that he's done has been a very good one, given how perilous it looks when he first walked through the door.
Kathryn, what I would say about Chris Wilder as well, I know he's been getting a bit of criticism on social media. I think I came out of the written press conference with him because I went to go and interview Ivor Pandor. But from what I gather, he did say in the written press conference, fair cop, credit to Ruben and to City, they deserved their win. He was very magnanimous about City. Perhaps in other interviews he didn't say those exact words, and I think that's perhaps what's been picked up on. But he definitely did say in the written press conference that City were good value for a team at the bottom, did everything right and fair credit. Obviously, when you look at the fixtures, the next two away fixtures are Burnley and Sunderland. So what that will do is, and as Prutts touched on it there about Plymouth going to Sunderland and getting I think a shock result. I think it's fair to say at the Stadium of Light there. But that will give them huge heart going into Turf Moor and then the Stadium of Light at the end of the month. That knowing that they can go to Sheffield United, which is, along with Burnley, the miserliest defence in the league at home, and come away with a positive result.
Yeah, and I think the way those teams play at home sort of suits the way we play away from home. You look at the first goal against Sheffield United, the counter-attacking kind of football. We know kind of that's quite a big thing of Ruben Sellers' play as well, as much as possession and everything else as well. He does want his teams to be able to punish teams on their counter-attack, and I imagine would expect Burnley and Sunderland to maybe have more of the ball at home, and if we can kind of exploit them in the same way we exploited Sheffield United, that might actually work out all right. I think it's about trying to find the ways to play against those teams when they are at home and trying to frustrate them and then take your chances when you get them. And I think the difference for us now is that we seemingly have players, we have more players that might be able to take chances in front of goal or create in front of goal and have a little bit more quality in the final third, which we obviously have been lacking at times this season. But when I looked at the bench on Friday, there's just so many more options that the manager could bring off it to make the team better or to give us something different. And when you have that, it makes a real difference. And they should be full of confidence. I know we've said it quite a few times this season after a win. They should be full of confidence, and then they immediately kind of go and lose the next game. But usually it's a home game that they kind of then go and slip up in. But away from home, they don't seem to be having any problems at the minute. It's as we've kind of said all season, it's just trying to sort that home form out.
The irony of Hull City scoring a goal against Sheffield United direct from the opposition corner wasn't lost on anybody, I don't think, either, was it? Prutts, from a player's point of view, obviously they've got a lot of new players. 6 have come in since the start of the window. We'll get on to where we're at a bit later on with a week to go. But clearly those players have made a difference. Obviously, I know they lost against QPR and the frustration of that, but Joe Gowhart scored a wonderful goal on his full debut. Mm-hmm. He was brilliant at Bramall Lane, and he's just been a nuisance and closing down and all that. Obviously, João Pedro's come in and done really well. Crooksy scored that wonderful goal to set him on the way. You have Elliot Mataza coming in from Monaco, made his debut after 54 minutes on Friday night. Obviously, Amrabat's come in. Lincoln wasn't deemed fit enough to be on the bench. But those new players have all kind of come in and just lifted the whole place. And also, when you look at, as Kathryn said, when you looked at the bench on Friday night, you go, actually, there's players on there that can come on and make a difference. And when he made his changes, Ruben, they did make a big difference in the game, didn't they? Because United started the second half really, vibrant on the front foot. City were careless in possession, were giving the ball away. And Ruben made those changes, and it got them a foothold back in the game and got them some control.
Yeah, he was proactive with it, which I thought was really, really good. We've chatted many times on here about players coming in and what and the irony being that we'll come on to talk about. We're making a big deal about players coming in last January, where the likes of Carvalho and Ryan Giles and people such as that, where you're saying these could really up the ante for what Hull City need. Obviously, a year on, it's a completely different set of circumstances. It's very much a survival bid. And I think it's very early days for these players and how they're going to be bedded in. We mentioned Joe and what he would want to bring from Leeds United, not just for the team, but for himself personally. Never underestimate what a player wants for himself, or himself, sorry. That's terrible grammar. I apologise to you both for that. because it to see it as transactional is partly right because it's a two-way thing. Matt Crooks comes back and shows the Championship what he can do. You never know where that takes the next step of his career, even though obviously his port of call right now is Hull City. Joe being frustrated about what minutes or lack of minutes he's getting at Leeds United, a perfect opportunity to show people what he's missing. Those are the two standouts for me. But as you say, tooling up with players that have come in and been able to collectively make City look a bit more formidable. And Kathryn, I totally agree with that. Looking at the bench, it's not one of those where you kind of see a manager, or you presume to see a manager turn around and go, because I've been in that position where a manager's turn around to look at the bench and just look completely crestfallen with who's. It's like, oh Christ, it looks terrible on the pitch, and it's not going to get any better with any of you lot going on. So you can really see. I mean, managers can't hide that sentiment, but I think it gives a nice. I'm not saying depth in the sense of it could be a very, very late and unlikely run to knocking on the door of the top six, because obviously there's a hefty portion of maths that works itself against City as well. But I just think, given what we've seen, especially away from home, you feel obviously this is a collaboration and a discussion, but it just seems like there's a bit more meat to this team now. Like there's a bit more ballast for it to kind of go, yes, how tumultuous it is in the Championship. There's just a sense of solidarity, I think. Not just saying because you bring a Matt Crooks in and Joe in, but the dynamics of who they bring in and where they bring that experience from. I think there's a lot to really, really like, and I think that's been borne out in those, especially on the road, as you say, Baz. It's those on the road performances and results. More importantly, again going back to that keyword results, that gives them a bit more of a foundation.
And Kathryn, Neil Warnock was obviously in the Sky Sports studio on Friday night, and he was obviously, when Emma Saunders was speaking to Ruben, Neil sort of said, the one thing that really impressed me about your performance, and it dovetails into what Prutts has just been saying, was about the passion, how they were fighting for each other. There was proper graft and that willingness to stop shots, to block crosses, to get tackles in, and even if a Blades player went past a City player, there was another City player on the cover to cover for his mate. And it's we haven't always seen that this season. That willingness to. I've been a staunch advocate of the lack. There's never been a lack of effort, lack of application, lack of quality, 1,000,000% at times this season. But I've never believed there's been a lack of effort. But it really kind of came to the fore on Friday night, didn't it? That they had to work hard, and particularly that 10-minute spell at the start of the second half where Blades were banging on the door, City were getting deeper. They weren't really having shots on target, but there was a lot of crosses, a lot of long throws from Jack Robinson, a lot of corners coming into the box. They had to hold firm, and then obviously Ruben made his changes, and they got the second goal. And then once Matty scores the second goal, I mean the last half an hour, 40 minutes, I thought was remarkably straightforward compared to what we would have been at 1-0. But it was that willingness to kind of put your body on the line was really, really impressive. And Neil Warnock picked up on it, didn't he?
Yeah, and I think it changed, obviously, Neil's kind of thoughts from, I'd been listening to him at the start of the game, and, as the rest of us have kind of thought as well, he basically didn't give us a hope in hell of getting a result, which was a fair kind of, assessment going into it. But by the end of the game, I think the team had shocked not only, Neil Warnock, but it shocked the fans and everyone watching as well. And like you say, I don't think there's ever been really much at times a lack of effort at all from the players. It's just been a case of that sometimes they looked beaten before they went out to play, and it was almost like a mindset rather than like a lack of desire or a will to kind of win. And I think what Ruben Sellers has brought is just kind of belief back into them. And actually, you need that belief to sometimes go the extra mile, to think, I am going to be able to go and stop that cross. I'm going to be able to go and make that block. It's that kind of mindset of, I'm not going to be able to do it, so I won't go and do it. And I think that is probably what's changed. And even like going back to when they came from 2 goals down against Leeds to get a point, I think earlier in the season, there's probably no chance that would have happened, because they wouldn't have believed they had any hope. And they needed a little bit of help in that game as well from the goalkeeper, but they still had that belief to keep pushing and to keep going and to going on and get the goal. And I think that's what we saw on Friday, in that once they went 1-0 up, there wasn't really a sense of panic, even when Sheffield United were kind of, getting back on top in the second half. They actually were very composed. And when that second goal went in, I thought, there's still actually quite a while left here. We've still got a bit of a game to see out. If they get one goal, it could go on and be a little bit nervy. But we didn't look troubled. We didn't panic. And like I say, I think there's just a sense of belief in the team now. I think that they can actually go and get results against the better teams. I think we've just got to believe they can do it against the teams kind of struggling down there with them as well.
Prutts, there's one player. Obviously, we've spoken a lot about a lot of those players, and it's difficult to pick out one who was exceptional on Friday night above everybody else, because from back to front, Jones, McLaughlin, Burns, I thought Drame at right back's got a lot of stick, was very good through midfield. Alzate, Carl Joseph on his debut didn't see a lot of the ball, but he did a job for the team in terms of his running. But Ivor Pandor obviously dropped for the Doncaster game, which we all expected to give Carl Rushworth a look. Then obviously the decision that the manager came to in playing Rushworth at Millwall, and then again against Queen's Park Rangers. Then Rushworth called back by Brighton because Jason Steele's injured. Ivor admitted, I spoke to him after the game, and people would have heard his interview with the BBC, that it was difficult for him to be dropped, having played every other game apart from that, the ones that the two he's been out the team for in the league. But from a player's point of view, you've just got to be. It happens, doesn't it? You've got to be professional. You've got to get your head down, get on with it, and because football changes, it's so fluid, it changes quickly. Be ready for that next opportunity. And there were a couple of hairy moments, particularly first half when he went up and punched across. And I had flashbacks to the night before Butland at Old Trafford when he punched into his own net. He got away with it. He punched onto the roof of his own net. But apart from that, that was a steady. He didn't have a huge amount to do in fairness, but that was a steady performance, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying, but then by virtue of as you say, players' contracts and recalls and all that, very quickly the door that you are just kind of banging on that's not remotely unlocked suddenly kind of drops open. So you've got to be ready to step through. You can't be sat there with arsey about it not going your way, because there's only, by definition, literally 11 places up for grabs that start the game, and the rest is all reflective and reactive to what goes on within those 90 minutes. So his job now is to make sure that that it does become his shirt, and he gives the manager no reason whatsoever to drop him. Would City be looking for another goalie in the next week or so, or do they seem relatively happy with that?
I think they're I think they're relatively happy. The initial suggestion was that Anthony Rachopi would come back into the fold, but he's still been told to find a new club. They've got Timothy Lotatala, who's very inexperienced at championship level, but they do rate highly. He's trained well, so he's the backup goalkeeper for now. But there has been interest in him from lower down in League One and in League Two. So it depends. I think basically it will depend on what opportunities come up. If they see another goalkeeper out there, they think a bit like Rushworth and think, actually, that's one you can't turn down. But it will depend on allowing out Lotatala on loan. I guess from his point of view as well, it would depend. Does he want to go and play in League One or League Two every week, or does he want to be championship backup and on the off chance he might get a game? Well, I mean, from a player's point of view, again, what are you thinking?
Well, it depends how much of a sniff you genuinely think you've got, because you'd be onto the manager just to make sure that firstly, you're training in a way to show that you were ready. You had the ambition to get there, that you weren't just happy to sit and be on number two. You'd have to have a chat with the manager to see what his thought process was, because if he thinks that Pandor's number one, and then there's a huge gap between who we would be comfortable with as a two, then that's a slightly different thing. Then you have to go and find minutes somewhere. But that domino effect, sometimes when you're trying to work out where you sit in the squad sense and what's best for you, sometimes you've got to be a little bit more selfish. So we'll see what the script is with that. But going back to Pandor being back as number one, onus is completely on him to play the way that Ruben wants to play. First and foremost, to keep a pretty decent backline in check. And I think as well, if you are the team that's playing in front of him, if you are that the defensive line that's playing in front of him, then you do need that element of regularity and consistency, because you work out your little idiosyncrasies with the players in and around you, but you also work out what your strengths and weaknesses are. So this team's known itself and been together long enough, I think, to know that anyway through training. But as we well know, that heat of battle when it comes to a championship game can be slightly different.
And Kathryn, we all spoke about Rushworth and the need to give him a go, and I think they had to. They obviously got a top goalkeeper at this level who hadn't played. He needed a look, and I think we all agreed that was the right decision. They obviously didn't. Their conversations with Brighton earlier in the window were that he's going to stay, so that was why he was played. It wasn't. They didn't see it coming. They didn't know that they were going to get that phone call on Wednesday morning last week to say we want him back. That wasn't. I know there was a bit of criticism for Ruben for playing Rushworth with that hanging. Well, it wasn't hanging over them. They believed that Rushworth would be staying. They didn't know he was going to get recalled. So in that situation, I don't think there can be any criticism levelled at the manager. He's got a very, very good goalkeeper there that he needed to look at, and he played him in the cup game, and he felt that was the right decision to play him at Millwall, and he kept a clean sheet and got 3 points. So he probably wasn't then going to change it for QPR, was he?
No, and I think he's managed it in the right way as well. And look, it might get a bit more out of Ivan Panda as well. Like, you think it might have kind of helped him go away and work on the things maybe he needed to work on that Ruben wanted to see from him, that he thought maybe Rushworth was better at doing. And sometimes for players it can be a good thing to kind of have a couple of games out and then get another opportunity to come back in and show, kind of, try and prove the manager wrong and show why he should have kept his place. And he looked like perfectly, all right on Friday, didn't he? Like we were saying, it's not like he's kind of gone away and sulked. And hopefully now for him, keeping that clean sheet in that big game, that kind of does him the world of good. And he can kind of go forward and be settled now. And look, I think as we say, I think he had to give Rushworth a chance. And it's just unfortunate the way it's worked out with Brighton needing to recall him because of the injury that they had to Steele. So just one of those, I guess. I think I was quite impressed with Rushworth, the brief bit that we saw of him. And he's clearly, a very good young goalkeeper that Brighton rate highly, and is probably going to go on and have a chance to be their number one at some point. But just one of those. I don't think it's a massive thing, and hopefully Pandor now does all right. I mean, did he seem kind of all right in his interview with you? He always seems quite chirpy, so. He seemed like he got a lot of praise from the fans after the game. He was one of the ones going over and celebrating. So,
yeah, he was fine. He said it had been difficult, but it's a very specialist position, isn't it? So it is what it is. I think he probably knew it was coming. He's not daft. You've got a player of Rushworth's ability who's coming on loan and hadn't played a minute. He was always going to get a chance, and the manager made the call. It's up to it's up to Panda to take it on the chin. It's football, respond in the right way, and I think he did that. Prutts, a question for you from Chris Dyer on Twitter: has the Sky curse been put to bed with that result and performance? Best I've seen from City on the telly. I think it's about 15 years since they last won a game on Sky.
Which is obviously Sky's fault. I get that totally. I would, from City's point of view, but if there is some sort of curse or hex that Sky have put on them, then hopefully that's now not the case.
And the second part of this question aimed at you also, Prutts.
Right.
Have we seen the dark arts and game management improve under Ruben? Gowhart and Crooks have added some much needed nastiness to our squad. Is that fair? It's a big part of the game now. We saw it a few weeks ago against Watford in his first game. Regan should have brought down the Watford man in the build-up to their goal. Didn't, and they scored. Then there was a couple of weeks later, Harry Vaughan did similar, but I think it was against Middlesbrough. Obviously, they lost that game, but Ben Doak raced past him. He pulled him back, got a yellow card. I think there was one second half. Gowhart, United had started to get in down the left-hand side. Gowhart pulled. He had to do it, got a yellow card for it. Yeah. But those everybody else does it, and it's not. Look. It's not great to watch if you're the opposition, but it is just part and parcel of football and something that. Did you do that as a player?
It's funny because it's always been there. Christ Almighty, whether it was chatting to a ref and not slating him straight off the bat to try and get him on your side a little bit when there was a 50-50 decision to be made. If you've not spent the last hour calling him every name under the sun, by human nature, he would probably lean more towards the fella that's been marginally nicer to him. I'm not saying they're easily coerced because they weren't, but that standing in front of free kicks to stop teams taking quick free kicks, a little tug of the shirt if you are in a position where you can't actually make a proper tackle. Yeah, to call it dark art. I mean, dark arts to me is it's taken on a bit of a different meaning, I think, in especially in this country, because the dark arts I always would have presumed were probably a generation ago coming out of without a gross generalizations, like Italian football or Spanish football, where there was a lot of underhand things going on and lots of meals being made of situations where you look at it and you go, well, that reaction absolutely does not kind of justify what happened in the first place. So I think a better way to class it would be game management, I think, because you have to do within, obviously, the laws of the game. And sometimes people talk about the spirit of the game, but to be a bit cynical about that, I think if you're operating within the spirit of a game, which is a very vague thing that doesn't exist on paper, whereas the laws of the game actually do. So if you're operating within those and pushing those boundaries and getting away with it, I think great. I'm not advocating cheating or diving or simulation or anything like that at all, because my God, there's way too much of that, and that has increased, unfortunately. But I think nous is another good word to use, of getting yourself over the line in a game where, even at 2-0, as going back to Kathryn's point, where you score that goal at that particular stage, regardless of whether Sheffield United have got a first choice 11 out or not, they've still got the firepower and the ability to still smash a team like Hull City to pieces in the last half an hour. That didn't come to fruition. So collectively managing the side, collectively managing the game, got them over the line. And going back to what I said, I think the acquisitions that have been made gives Hull City a little bit more character as well, I think, because if it's a team that you've both seen so much of over the course of a season, where bits were being made about the way that Tim Volter went about man management and all of that. And to be brutally honest, there was a few that were feeling a little bit sorry for themselves. There was a bit of self-pity going on in a profession which is brutal at times. And I'm sorry, you've just got to take a fair bit of that on the chin. And I don't think there were. I think there was a little bit of, he's been a bit mean to me. And it's, you know what I mean? Yeah. Whereas a collective, totally underperforming, completely underperforming, nowhere near it for a long stretch of that opening portion, be it away from run of four victories, which then led to, what was it, 13 or 14 games without a win. So, which then, by virtue of that, cost the manager his job, regardless of what you think about Tim's approach and his ability and his tactics, which again, we're nowhere near the level of the Championship. Neither was the squad. So, I like the fact that maybe a City have brought in people with a fresh perspective on it. They've not known what's gone on for the last 6 months, have they? They've not known what happened at the tail end of last season, even though they might have watched it from afar. But they've come in and kind of instantly gone, sleeves rolled up, right? We're in the mire. Let's get out of it. And so far, it's been wonderfully grown up, I think.
And that, exactly. And a few comments from on Twitter. The aptly named Flat Cap and Ferret. Crooks was sensational. Nothing beats Championship experience. Anley Jules, the new signings have brought energy, physicality, and devilment to the side, something that previously lacking. The first goal, he says, Anley Jules, was one that we wouldn't have scored earlier in 2024. Need to follow it up with 3 points. Yeah, we'll come on to that. Jason Statham, as Burnsley would say, no, not that one. Jones was outstanding. Yeah, absolutely he was. And I think we'll come on to that, Jonesy, probably next time, because we're not going to have time today. With all the bad signings we've made, can we give the brain team some credit for the good ones that we've made? Alzate was quality midfield. Pedro works his socks off. Pandor hasn't done a lot wrong. Play like this, and we are more than safe. A lot of comments, and thank you for those coming in on Twitter about the new signings, the energy, the impact they've made, and just that extra bit of craft. And as you say, that guile, Prutts, and that nous of knowing how to manage a game, particularly when your back's against the wall. So Kathryn, let's move on to transfers then. A week to go. We know that they still want new players. They've signed 6 so far. One of those is Charlie Taylor, discussions ongoing. One of those is Sorba Thomas, discussions ongoing. He wasn't in the non-squad that played on Sunday afternoon against Lyon. Where do you think that what are you laughing at, Prutton?
I'll tell you later. Self-regulation there.
Okay. Yeah, fair play. And that's impressive. You are getting better.
Yeah.
A year ago, you'd have just blurted it out.
I would, and then you probably never would have heard from me again.
Yeah. Banished to the bin man. Kathryn, where do you feel that they need they still need strengthening in this final? The window closes 11 o'clock next Monday night.
I think they still need to strengthen at full-back. As impressed I was with Sean McLaughlin at left-back against Sheffield United. And Cody Jarmo was much better on Friday night as well. Cody was still a bit at fault against QPR on Tuesday. And I think that's still an area where the depth is lacking and they do need to strengthen there. I think that would probably be my one area, I reckon. Do you mind if I just have 5 minutes? I'm just feeling a little bit ill.
Oh, blimey, yeah.
Sorry, I'm just. I might just go and get a glass of water or something.
Sure.
Sorry, how did I get off?
Prutts, in terms of the window, they've signed 6 already. That's a lot of business. But they have been proactive. When you look at other teams, perhaps in and around them at the bottom of the table, they have been really proactive. And there'll be some fans, and I get it, that will say, it's a bit scattergun. You've signed Matt Crooks from the MLS. You've signed Lincoln Henrique from Fenerbahce's reserves, essentially. You've got Elliot Matazzo coming in from Monaco, who played Champions League only a few weeks ago. Kind of, how would you assess it, looking at it from your position?
Well, I think, it's very early days with putting the squad together in this window, but I think, literally, they're in a better position than when they started. So that there is a bit of proof in the pudding, isn't there? I understand what City fans would be saying, because absolutely right. Is it Anne Libby-Joel said about the brains trust, which is correct. You've got to give them the due when things go initially, from what we've seen, okay with recruitment, but you have got to hold them to account when things don't. And there has been many occasions where you look at players that have come and you think, nowhere near it. So the mixture of who they've brought in and where they brought them in from, it's not necessarily judging that specific player on his own. It's how he fits into the collective, and how he to use one of my words that I do overuse, how they dovetail into what the manager wants and how the squad is able to perform. So I think you've got to say so far so good, because as we've always said, you bring a player in, and yes, fundamentally he's got to be good and tactically sound and technically proficient, but he's got to fit in with the chemistry and the kind of well-being of the group. And I think what you've got, and I keep referring to Joe and Matt, that's mainly because to absolutely hold my hands up with it. Other players that have come in, I've got no prior knowledge of. I've got no until I see a decent body of work of them with my own eyes. I've seen Joe play. I've seen Matt play for ages. I've seen what they've done, and I've heard managers speak about them in glowing terms in the EFL. So even though you've got a player that's been over playing in MLS, let's not be for 1 second detrimental about what he's been up to, because he's got a whole heap of experience back over here before then. So it's about what they can do for Hull City initially in these next few months. I know that there's different contracts that have been signed and different commitments up front from the various players and where they've come from. But all that matters is February, March, April, May. That's all that matters now, because there's been a hole that collectively City have dug themselves into, and as a collective is the only way they'll get out of it.
Has the manager been quite clever in some respects in terms of managing the new signings? Because given the predicament they were in, it would have been very easy to throw Crooks straight in, and in that desperation to try and find a result from somewhere, especially at home. Throw Crooks in, throw Gowhart in. Even on Friday night, Sheffield United, you sign Lincoln. You're a team that don't score a huge amount of goals. You've got an attacking player there. At least stick him on the bench, and you maybe get 15 minutes out of him. But he's kind of drip fed Crooks in. That was his first start. He drip fed kind of Gowhart in. That was his first start against QPR in midweek. Obviously, resisted Lincoln, as put him on the bench. Matazo came on, who's probably the fittest of them all, having played the most, and came on for the final half an hour or so. Is he being, is he showed kind of like, I'll take a step away from emotion, and that what most of us would do is emotion, just chuck them all in and hope it works.
Well,
and he's like, actually, no, we've got to structure this because we don't want to injure them, and we want to have them for the rest of the season.
Well, yeah, and also what he will know, given the size of the medical and physical department at Hull City, will be the minutes that these players have recently got under the belts. If you look at, again, I talk about Matt and Joe more because I know more about potentially their situations. It's Joe has needed minutes at Leeds, and what you sometimes see now with these squads is you'll get the first team playing, and that old school sense of what a reserve team was isn't really there. A development squad, under 23s, again, the stipulations about players of a certain age that can play in those particular games, isn't there? I mean, whereas Joe's still relatively young from that point of view, but wouldn't have had the amount of competitive minutes. And if Matt's finished an MLS season autumn going into winter of last year, then there's an amount of time there without that real kind of coalface type training. So it'll be as much holistic as it will be physical, and he'll have the data right in front of him. You know what it's like, mate. You've been to the training ground. It always fascinates me that people are quite surprised by the level of scientific detail when you're paying these commodities to come away from the personal side of it. They're paying commodities vast amounts of money and investing in them, so they absolutely should know when and where they're in the red zone, or whether they need to be pushed, or whether you need to pull them back a little bit. So it'll be part of it will be the well-being of the player and the person, but the other part would be, I absolutely wholeheartedly believe, would be statistically based. So Crooksy will want to be able to get around the pitch in his championship pomp sooner rather than later. So 55, 60 minutes on Friday stands him in great stead. 54, yeah. Make no mistake, they'll be getting worked in training as well. There'll be a hefty slant on the fitness side of it as well, because they'll know what's needed. And the good thing about that is that it's not anything. Going back to what we've said about the chemistry of the squad and the way they're put together, they'll have done their due diligence in wanting to bring players in that were prepared to work hard, because that's the only way they're going to get themselves out of their predicament.
Kathryn, are you feeling better?
Yeah, sorry for that very dramatic exit there. Just all of a sudden, I think I've not had anything to eat this morning, so I think maybe I'm just a bit suddenly I'm quite a pale person as it is, but suddenly all the colour was just draining from my face, and I was like, not feeling too good here. I might just need to...
quite a pale person, as it is.
I am. It's the truth.
Well, without wanting to sound all fatherly, Kathryn, can you make sure you have some sustenance at some stage, because that's nowhere near good enough for you. You need your energy.
I will.
Prutts, I wanted to ask you, and that
I had a fryer. That's the other side of the equation. That's you're eating too much, you greedy son.
That lad to Fletcher's best mate who made the joke about the 1904 club being like a revolving door, and one person pulls in and one drops out.
Kathryn, say bye.
I'm feeling like I'm going to die. I better go. Just start his live on air. Brilliant. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, Prutts, before Kathryn came back. From your point as a player, a few years ago now, what was it like? I mean that in the best sense of the word.
And literally, because it was a few years ago, so it's fine.
You look like you could play five-a-side tonight. What was it like back in your day, as with managing loads and fitness and recovery after a game, before a game, and what in a 3-game week? How was your training schedule managed, and your minutes, all that sort of stuff? Obviously, compared to what we see now, and the huge, very public emphasis on managing those sorts of things that perhaps were made so public, early 2000s, in the 90s and before that, maybe.
I mean, it's probably put him in some more sharp focus with what happened in and around the Spurs game yesterday with players that weren't available for full fitness. Was the bit that I heard about Ange talking about Maddison being sore or something like that, about managing player loads and managing what position physically they find themselves in? As a player, especially in the Championship and the Football League, when you are playing games very, very quickly after each other, then what happened in between games was just more management. You'd be ticking over. But if you were playing Wednesday and then you had a game Saturday, then there is an element of working on your recovery and making sure that you are fit and ready and raring to go on game day, because that's the most important thing. The bit that would be frustrating if you weren't in the side would be not being able to go at full tilt between the games to get yourself up to the sharpness to push on the door and knock on the door of the first 11. So I think it's probably the vocabulary that's changed around it a little bit. What used to be the case was if a player looked knackered on a pitch on a Saturday or a Tuesday night, then he might get a little rest in the next game. I think the technology has been ramped up. Kathryn is playing 10 years ago. So I think even in that decade, there's been a lot more emphasis on that. And that works its way down the pyramid as well. But as a player, maybe the mindset's changed. Like, as a player, you're always chomping at the bit and wanting to play, because the only currency that you've got as a player is the most recent minutes that you've played. And if that was, say, if that's a Monday morning like we're talking now, and that was a Saturday afternoon, that's you banging the picture and banging form and banging the side, which is absolutely the only place that you want to be if you're a player. Like I said, I think it's more the discussion and the vocabulary around it. But I get it. Like I said, these are highly paid commodities that need looking after. And if you want to get the best out of that particular commodity, it's got to be dealt with in the right way. I still think there is an element where we're going overboard a bit with it, really, where there's almost a kind of, I mean, it's a broader debate about how much football teams are playing, but I think, especially if you get further up the tree in the Premier League, if you're playing a lot of games, that's because you are successful, therefore generating a lot of money, therefore get on with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to very quickly box off transfer. So we've got a week to go. City want to Charlie Taylor and Sorba Thomas. We expect a flurry of departures. Xavi Simons is wanted by AIK in Sweden, so we expect that to progress at some point. Chris Bedia has a choice of 4 or 5 clubs he can go to. Anthony Richopi, we're expecting him to go, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's 1 or 2 loan exits. So that's that. Obviously, progress. We'll see what happens over the next few days. Kathryn, Ryan Giles, obviously that deal we've known has been in the offing for a long time, since pretty much the day he signed permanently at Hull City. That has been done. He's obviously he made his second debut for Borough at Preston on Saturday. Came on just before Preston scored their winning goal. He did an interview after the game, said he wants to stay. It is only a straight loan. There is no option or obligation to buy. Straight loan at this stage. City are paying a percentage of his wages. Now, he's come out and done an interview, as players would, and he said, look, I want to stay. I mean, if the boot was on the other foot, if it was a player at Hull City who had been kind of, we know there was some not speculation, it was fact, but conjecture about his future. He's gone where he wants to go. He comes out, yeah, I really want to stay. If that was at Hull City, you'd be like, yeah, fair. In terms of Giles, is that understandable that Middlesbrough have wanted him since last summer? In fact, they've wanted him since he left on loan 2 years ago. He's now back there and he wants it to stay because for whatever reason, the City move has been an abject failure, hasn't it? And an expensive one at that.
Yeah, he's not going to come out in an interview and say, I'm not really bothered about staying here, or I don't want to stay. Like he's going to obviously come out and say that whether he wanted to or not. And he's not had a particularly great time here, as you mentioned. Maybe he'll go to Middlesbrough and rediscover the form he had a couple of years ago. But I wasn't massively surprised to see him say that. And ultimately, you want players that want to be here. And I think we got to the point where Ryan Giles didn't want to be here anymore. He quite clearly wanted to go back to Middlesbrough. And, good luck to him. I hope it works out. And maybe he will stay there. And that probably works out best for everyone.
Prutts, City need it to work, don't they? They need Ryan Giles to go to Middlesbrough, tear it up, find the form that saw him get 12 assists for Borough in their playoff season a couple of years ago, and then they've got a saleable asset. If he goes to Middlesbrough, bombs, they don't get promoted, it doesn't work out. Suddenly they've got a £4 million asset that they still owe the money on, that they've got a big salary, and they're going to struggle to shift if it doesn't work out. So it's in City's interests that he goes there and plays well, and they can try. I mean, I'm not convinced they're ever going to recoup the £4 million they paid Luton for him, but get something positive for him in the summer.
Yeah, and like you say, it works all round, because it's been increasingly an uneasy fit, hasn't it? I was waxing lyrical about Ryan when he came in, and I presume that does reflect potentially what a lot of people thought, given, I say pedigree. I mean, he was still part of a Borough side that didn't get promoted. So I don't know. It's what you've seen with your own eyes, and what I saw as a very, very good Championship player. I presume he's hoping to get back to that in familiar surroundings. You get the feeling that if it was a case where he wasn't too happy with his time at Hull City, but Borough weren't in for him, it might not have been as straightforward a situation where he could jump from one ship to another. So it's I think if you're from a purely bean counting point of view at City, you are kind of going, well, hopefully he does rediscover something that they then can put as a very plausible asset to sell for a decent amount of money. Because I mean what word did you use to describe his time at City? Did you say disastrous?
Yeah, I think the whole thing's
because it's relative. Yes. The City brought in a lot of players that they thought would get him over the line. They had a manager who they thought would get them over the line into the playoffs. They didn't. That's a collective. And like I said, I think maybe because we'd looked at what Ryan had done and the numbers that he'd posted in a team that was looking to get promoted, and thought, well, does the same with City, then happy days. But that didn't tend to be the case. I just think, and I'm not judging Ryan or anything like that at all, because there was discussions in the summer, wasn't there, about him potentially moving on, and he was less than kind of, I'm not saying you've got to go there beating your chest and show off your Hull City tattoo, but you can potentially sound a little bit more enamoured with being at a place that, as you say, is paying you a lot of money, and good training ground, good facilities, good stadium, a loud fan base. Lots of things to really, really like about playing for City, not just because we're biased and we're from Hull. But it's, I just think, but then on the flip side of it is, if he is there saying that, and it's quite obvious that he's not believing that, then it seems like he's slightly taking the mickey out of the fans, doesn't it?
I think he genuinely wants to go, and I think my terminology, probably extreme, but in terms of the financials of it, I just think it's been a disastrous move. Obviously, they signed him on loan, and I think we all said this time last year, belting signing. If he can achieve what he did at Borough in Liam Rosenior's team, great, fantastic. We all thought it was a good signing. Then obviously we know what we know in the summer, that he wanted to go back to Middlesbrough. Middlesbrough wanted him. City had agreed a deal, and everything was in place. Because of the optics around the summer movement, they decided that wasn't going to happen. PR wise, it would have been disastrous for them. They kept him. It's not worked out. He's not played well. He's not found, I think, 35 games, 1 assist since he joined. They paid £4 million. They paid £4 million for a player who's on a lot of money, and they've got absolutely no. And I'm not hanging Ryan out to dry here. I know a lot of people will want me to, but I'm not going to. It's just not worked, and only Ryan will know why that is. There's been games where he's looked okay. There's been a lot of games where he's looked absolutely rubbish. And hopefully Ryan will go to Middlesbrough and find that.
Is this you not hanging him out to dry? Jeez.
But I think. I mean, he's not the only one, in fairness. But I think, given what we expected from Ryan and his caliber, I think we expected an awful lot more, and it just has not transpired. And there could be any myriad of reasons why. For Ryan, it just hasn't worked. Personally, off the pitch, he might have had things there. He might not have settled. He might not have found whatever. That's up to him. And it's just, for City, financially, it's been a disastrous move, and they have to get him. Hope that Middlesbrough get him in form, find that form that he had 2 years ago, and then they might get something out of it in the summer. Otherwise, it's another noose around the neck. Right, we need to move on because we've only got a few minutes left. Let's talk Stoke City. home form, yes. Well, it's important, isn't it? Look, they've got 8 home games left. They've won 2 at home all season. I think 26 games since they got promoted in '84 back from the Championship. They've got eight home games to go. 4 of them are against Stoke, Derby. We'll go in order: Stoke, Plymouth, Luton, and Derby, with Norwich, Oxford, and Preston chucked in for good measure. Kathryn, if they are going to find a way to stay in this division, and they've proved away from home because they've got the 9th best away record in the division, they've got to find a way to get off the bottom of the home record in the league and find some wins. And Stoke, I think, have got 2 away wins all season. So what an opportunity.
Exactly. And it kind of goes back to, I think, maybe the way we play at home might be different to the way we play away from home. And you've got to be able to find ways to break teams down if they're going to come, to the MKM and just maybe sit back. And I can kind of imagine maybe Stoke sort of trying to do that, trying to come in, try and get a point and get back out. And we might have to, play a bit differently to the way we played on Friday night. It'll be a different type of game. And I think the teams that you've just mentioned, all the teams down at the bottom, the ones fighting for their lives, they're probably going to be scrappier games than the ones when you're playing teams at the top. And you've got to try and not get dragged in, not, I don't want to say dragged down to that level, but dragged into just kind of it being a really scrappy game and, not kind of playing the way the manager wants you to. And in a weird way, sometimes those games, and clearly they have been for City as well, they can be harder to get 3 points from than sometimes playing teams at the top. That's kind of the way the Championship can sometimes strangely work, especially the further along down the season you go. But I think it's almost like a psychological thing as well. It's probably in the players' heads as well. A lot of them were part of the, senior team that struggled at home. It's happening for a second season in a row. And I think once they get, we thought it maybe Swansea might help, but obviously it didn't. But if they could just get, a home win off the back of, away wins, that might kind of be the trigger for them to maybe, banish that ghost essentially. So I think Stoke's a good opportunity to do that.
Prutts, the expectation when City
either that or it could be the worst game anyone's ever seen.
They have won their last 3 at the MKM Stadium, and all 3 have been absolutely turgid encounters. At home to Leeds, nobody gives them a chance. Away at Sheffield United, nobody gives them a chance. They draw with Leeds, they thump Sheffield United. When you look at these games coming up, the home games coming up, the expectation on Hull City is to go out and win the game, go out and put a performance on, but ultimately, irrespective of performance, go and get the result and win the game. Does that change their mindset that the expectation now and the pressure is on them? Perhaps it wasn't at Bramall Lane.
Well, the team's literally on the same points. I would say, Stoke have just underachieved consistently for Christ ever since they dropped out of the Premier League, haven't they? Really, that's kind of neither here nor there going into the actual game on Saturday. But I think. I don't know. I think most of the City fans I've met are quite a pragmatic bunch. I don't think for one second they'd be getting carried away with these performances and results on the road and then saying, well, then by that fact, we should absolutely pump Stoke City at home. We should have 75% possession. We should have X amount of attempts on goal, because City haven't been that team consistently this season. I think without wanting to kind of preempt what the game might be like, I would say strap yourselves in for something that would be pretty attritional, to be brutally honest. And I think if you ask, listening to this, obviously as a City fan, it would be quite niche if you weren't a City fan and you were listening to this. But having seen what's gone on over the last year, even going back to Liam's team, so many games we spoke about at home where people are going, Christ almighty, it's a tough watch, because he wanted to slow the game down. He wanted to have the ball in certain situations, which, to be brutally honest, didn't make for thrilling football. Whereas I think, given what we've seen with City on the road under Ruben, I could well understand why you'd be getting excited. I just think for some reason it doesn't translate as yet into the home side of it. That Watford game where you're not seeing the game out and there's a bit of disappointment in that as one that springs to mind. But I don't think for one second there'll be the vast majority of City fans are getting carried away with what the results have been on the road and the performances have been on the road to say that therefore it should be exactly like we believe it to be at the MKM as well. I think there's a certain element of understanding that it's going to be tough, and Stoke have quite obviously got as much motivation to come to City and come away with at least a clean sheet because of where they find themselves also in a perilous position. So I think it is maybe a mindset that transfers it back to the home ground and the home performances and the home results, but it will by no means be a straightforward way of going about it, I don't think.
Prutts, is it must win?
Yeah.
Kathryn, I'll ask you that in a minute. Must win, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. Kathryn, would you agree?
Because of where they find themselves and who the next two. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Well, let's hope it is, and they do. Obviously, Stoke on Saturday, 3:00 kickoff. And then the window closes at 11 o'clock next Monday night. There'll be plenty of drama, I'm sure.
Doesn't close, Baz. What does it do?
Slam shut.
Correct.
Yeah, well, let's see what happens. It's going to be entertaining because, of course, this is Hull City, and when is it not? For good, for better and for worse, Prutts, eh? You're supposed to come
Silence. That was silence.
What? For better or for worse? I mean, that was quite a final statement, really, wasn't it? never a dull moment, is there, with this wonderful football team? But I go back to what we said at the start. What Ruben's given the side, a sense of belief, a sense of purpose, and just there's no other way of saying it. They just look like they've got. Yeah, I think you know what I want to say. They've got just more balls about them, haven't they? It seems like.
Say that.
I've said it.
There we are. On that bombshell, on the Bulls bombshell.
God.
I don't want just quickly, Baz. I don't want to end on a negative, but just a very quick, basically, essentially a quick message to any fans listening that might be deciding to take a flare to the next away game. Just a plea to please don't, because there was a couple of fans in the away end on Friday. I think a flare had been let off in the concourse, and there were some fans that suffered from asthma attacks as a result of it. And it's football's kind of for everyone, and things like flares, they're dangerous. It doesn't, any kind of benefit you think having a flare at a game does, if increasing atmosphere, I don't think it does. I just, the dangers of it outweigh all of that. We know a City fan was hit by one a couple of years ago, and I think if just don't take them and don't let them off. It's selfish, and especially for fans that are younger or less able to move out of where a flare's been let off. For disabled fans, it's very difficult. So the club's been warned about it before as well. There was a flare at Millwall, and as I say, one on Friday. And it's just, if you're thinking of taking one, please don't.
Yeah, we know there was a situation in Barnsley a few seasons ago, weren't there, where there was a young fan got hit and needed medical attention. And I know there's been issues, and City ultimately have to pay for the privilege. They will have. I know a couple of seasons ago, the toilets at Bramall Lane got absolutely ransacked, and City had to pay a hefty repair bill. So no doubt they will get punished for that as well. Absolutely, Kathryn, and I'm sure there'll be more coming out about that in the coming days as well.
Just go watch the football. I mean, that type of stuff, without sounding like a goody two shoes, I mean, it's literally illegal to take stuff like that into a football match. So don't be a dick and bring a flare in and let it off.
That's what I want to say, but like Prutts says, that's why we work. You see, fire
and ice, Kathryn. Fire and ice.
It was one of those
I don't know what Baz is.
On Friday night, because I could see, I could smell that acrid smoke from the press box well before kickoff, and then obviously there were a few fans already in the seats in the away end, and then obviously you see the smoke start emanating out of the concourse into the ether of the sky. So it clearly hadn't been let off inside the stand. And I know there'll be some fans that go, yeah, but look at the impact it has, abroad and the atmosphere. And I mean, I was at the Champions League final at Wembley, and the Dortmund fans were letting off flares, and the spectacle just at the start of the second half, the Dortmund behind the goal was incredible, absolutely incredible. But unfortunately, we there's obviously an issue, and letting them off inside a and the Bramall Lane, I've been in there many times. The Bramall Lane concourse isn't the biggest. It's just it boggles the mind that somebody would let off a flare inside a concourse. Anyway.
Well, it'd be terrifying. I mean, like we said before we started recording, if you are either in the concourse or outside the concourse, smoke coming out of a football stadium, Jesus Christ. I mean, we'd have to remind people of what awful things have happened in the past with regards to not necessarily flares, but being in horrendously confined spaces with safety being the bottom priority. So that is, and again, going back to what Kathryn's point was, and it starts there, but it broadens out into if children are there and if people of a certain temperament are there that are intimidated by big crowds, and maybe say there's part of me saying if you don't like big crowds, then you wouldn't make a beeline for a football match. But again, without trying to beat a drum, because it's something that I've worked on and seen a lot of, the accessibility of what football is makes it what the spectacle is and why we all love it. And if you've got people that are terrified for the safety, and as Kathryn quite rightly says, that can't help themselves to get out of a situation, that'd be god awful, wouldn't it? So, but then I mean, sometimes that's trying to make sense of the nonsensical and trying to put common sense to people that potentially don't have as much as they should do. I understand what you're saying from a spectacle point of view, Baz. Those images of yesteryear where a football match looks like just glorious chaos is then put into sharp focus by being a grown-up, hopefully, and making a judgment call of maybe not let this flare off in this very confined concrete bunker of a room, which could potentially turn very dangerous indeed.
Well, ultimately, look, whether you agree that flares add to the atmosphere inside a stadium or not, and in Europe they're allowed, it's a moot point. It's against the law. So whether we like it or we don't like it is a moot point. The fact is, the law is clear. You cannot take a flare, and if you let it off, you're breaking the law. That's not us being killjoys or the fan play or anything like that. It's just dead simple, isn't it? It's not our opinion.
Also, something like asthma, like with the fans suffering asthma, you don't know people have got asthma. They don't go around wearing a badge saying, "By the way, I've got asthma." Like a lot of, some disabilities are obvious to see, and some conditions that people suffer aren't easy to see. And you might say, "Oh, well, I've let a flare off and it's not hit anyone, so it's fine." Well, it's like, well, no, because it can affect people in different ways, and people shouldn't have to wear a badge at a football game saying, "I've got asthma, please don't set a flare off near me." And it's just that, it's about, as we say, people just trying to think about people, not only themselves. And, how would they like it if it affected one of their family members, or if someone they knew, or even themselves was kind of hit by one, or, suffered as a result of it. So, yeah, I just thought it was an important one to bring up.
Absolutely.
Although it does kind of end on a negative, though. So let's beat Stoke.
Yeah, 3 points against Stoke. Absolutely. Right. Fletch, thanks for turning up for at least 8 seconds. Prutts, thank you as always, and Kathryn as well. Hopefully you start to feel better when you've had I don't know, like
sustenance.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody, and we'll be back again soon. And here's to 3 points against Stoke on Saturday.